Before you continue, pause for a moment and be fully present. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders relax. Put your hand over your heart if that feels right to you. Allow yourself to settle into this moment. What you are about to hear is not just another piece of content passing through your day. There is something deeper here, something that may feel strangely familiar, something that may touch a part of you that has been quietly waiting to hear these words. If this message found its way to you today, do not dismiss that too quickly. Sometimes, certain truths appear in our lives at exactly the moment we are ready to understand them. Not before, not after. Right when we are prepared to receive them. There is something important for you to consider. Somewhere out there is a person who has been thinking about you far more than you realize. Not occasionally, not every now and then, but consistently, deeply, quietly. Your presence has remained with them even during moments when they acted as though they had moved on. Even when they appeared distracted by other things. Even when life carried them in different directions. Your name has stayed in their thoughts. Your memory has stayed close to their heart. And lately, something has begun to change. Whether you call it fate, timing, life, destiny, or simply the natural unfolding of events, something is shifting beneath the surface. This person is moving toward a realization they can no longer avoid. And what eventually comes from that realization may surprise you in ways you never expected. Take another moment and let that sink in. This message did not arrive in your life by accident. There are moments when we encounter exactly what we need to hear, not because someone planned it, not because the universe is sending secret signs, but because something inside us is ready to pay attention. And right now, there may be a reason your attention has been drawn here. Think about someone who became quiet, someone who pulled away, someone who seemed to disappear without fully explaining why. Maybe they acted like everything was fine. Maybe they behaved as though your connection no longer mattered. Maybe they convinced both themselves and everyone around them that they had completely moved on. But beneath the surface, something very different has been happening. Recently, something inside them shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else could easily see. It was quiet, subtle, personal. But it was significant. The kind of change that begins deep within a person long before it becomes visible on the outside. And because of that change, they are moving closer to a moment they have been avoiding for a very long time. They are not returning simply to exchange polite words. They are not returning because they are bored. They are not returning because they want casual conversation. They are returning because there is something inside them that has become impossible to ignore. A truth, a feeling, a realization. Something they have carried for much longer than they ever intended. And eventually, carrying it alone became too heavy. When they finally speak, the words may seem sudden to you. But for them, those words have been forming for a long time. Now let's talk about why this often happens. Some connections do not follow ordinary rules. They do not disappear simply because time passes. They do not vanish because people stop talking. They do not always fade because distance grows. Certain people leave a lasting impression on us. Certain relationships shape us in ways we do not fully understand until much later. And chances are, you have already felt traces of this. Maybe there were moments when this person entered your mind without warning, moments when you were focused on something completely unrelated and suddenly remembered them. Maybe you heard a song that brought back a memory. Maybe you saw something ordinary and instantly thought of them. Maybe you had a dream that felt unusually vivid. Maybe you woke up with emotions you could not explain. Experiences like these often leave us wondering why someone continues to occupy space in our minds long after they have gone. The answer is not always mysterious. Sometimes it is simply because certain people affect us more deeply than others. Sometimes A meaningful connection leaves an imprint that takes much longer to fade. And while you were having your own moments of remembering, something similar was happening on their side as well. They tried to move forward. They kept themselves busy. They filled their schedule. They distracted themselves with work, responsibilities, entertainment, and daily life. They told themselves they were fine. They told themselves enough time had passed. They told themselves they had already moved on. And during certain moments they may have believed it. But there is something interesting about quiet moments, when distractions disappear, when the day comes to an end, when there is no one around to impress and no noise to hide behind. The truth often becomes much harder to avoid. And in those moments, thoughts have a way of returning. Memories have a way of resurfacing. Feelings have a way of making themselves known. Again and again you appeared in their mind, not because they wanted to think about you, not because they were trying to hold on, but because some part of them had not fully processed what your connection meant. And that kind of persistent reflection changes people. Over time, it forces them to ask questions they have been avoiding. Why does this still matter? Why does this memory still feel alive? Why have I not been able to completely let this go? Why does this person still occupy space in my heart when so much time has passed? Those questions are uncomfortable, because answering them honestly requires courage. It requires a person to look beyond excuses. It requires them to examine their own choices. It requires them to acknowledge feelings they may have spent years trying to suppress. From the outside, they may appear confident. They may look successful. They may seem completely unaffected. But beneath that appearance, there has been an ongoing conflict. A private conversation happening within them. A battle between what they wanted to believe and what they actually felt. And little by little, the truth began winning. They started revisiting moments they once ignored, conversations they once dismissed, memories they once pushed aside. The sound of your voice, the way you understood them, the comfort of your presence, the connection they once took for granted. Each memory carried a question, and that question became harder and harder to escape. Why did this matter so much? Why has nothing fully replaced it? Why does this still feel unfinished? Eventually, they reached a realization that was impossible to ignore. You mattered more than they ever admitted. More than they told other people. More than they told themselves. And that realization changed everything. Of course, even after reaching that realization, uncertainty remains. They still do not know how you will respond. They do not know if the feelings they carry today are enough to repair what was once damaged. They do not know if too much time has passed. They do not know if your life has changed in ways that leave no room for them anymore. They do not know whether this conversation will open a new door or gently close an old one. But they do know one thing. Remaining silent is no longer something they can live with. There is a certain kind of regret that does not disappear with time. Many people believe that enough years can erase anything. They believe distance softens every memory and heals every unresolved feeling. Sometimes that is true, but sometimes it is not. Sometimes regret stays quietly in the background. It becomes part of a person's inner world. Not loud enough to control their life, but never quiet enough to disappear. It returns during reflective moments. It appears during important life events. It surfaces when they see something that reminds them of what once mattered. And the reason it stays is simple. Something meaningful happened. Something real existed. Yet it was never fully acknowledged, never fully understood, never fully addressed. Because of that, part of the story remained unfinished. And carrying unfinished stories can become exhausting. Eventually they realized they did not want to carry that weight any longer. That realization led them here. Not because they expect a specific outcome, not because they are certain everything will work out, but because honesty finally became more important than avoidance. Think about what that means for a moment. Choosing to face someone, choosing to speak openly, choosing to risk rejection, choosing to step out from behind years of silence. None of that is easy. In fact, for many people, it is one of the hardest things they will ever do. That decision reflects something important. It reflects growth. It reflects self-awareness. It reflects a willingness to confront truths that were once uncomfortable. The version of them that existed before could not have done this. The version that avoided difficult conversations. The version that misunderstood what they were feeling. The version that could not meet you where you needed them to meet you. That version would have continued hiding. That version would have found another excuse. That version would have convinced itself that silence was easier. But something changed, and that change matters. Because reaching a point where someone can honestly acknowledge their shortcomings requires humility. It requires them to stop defending themselves. It requires them to stop explaining away their choices. It requires them to see things clearly, not through pride, not through fear, not through self-protection, but through truth. And when someone reaches that point, their words carry a different kind of weight. Not because the words themselves are magical, but because of everything that had to happen inside them before those words could finally be spoken. At the same time, your role in this moment is equally important. This is where many people become lost. Because when someone returns carrying honesty and vulnerability, hope naturally appears. Hope is understandable. Hope is human. Hope wants to believe that everything finally makes sense. Hope wants confirmation that the connection mattered. Hope wants reassurance that the feelings were mutual. Hope wants to believe this is the beginning of something being restored. And perhaps it is. Perhaps this conversation opens a path neither of you expected. Perhaps it creates space for healing. Perhaps it creates space for understanding. Perhaps it creates space for something new. But it is equally important to remain grounded, because hope without awareness can be misleading. When people become consumed by hope, they sometimes stop paying attention to reality. They overlook important details. They ignore inconsistencies. They rush toward an outcome before understanding what is truly happening. They focus so much on what they want that they stop seeing what actually exists. Awareness works differently. Awareness allows you to remain present. Awareness allows you to listen carefully. Awareness allows you to notice not only the words being spoken, but also the sincerity behind them. It helps you observe how someone carries themselves. It helps you recognize whether responsibility is being taken honestly. It helps you see whether accountability is genuine or simply convenient. Because words alone are only the beginning. Words matter. Honest communication matters. Acknowledgement matters. Apologies matter. But none of those things tell the entire story. Anyone can describe what they have learned. Anyone can explain what they understand now. Anyone can express regret during an emotional conversation. The deeper question comes afterward. What happens next? Do their actions reflect their words? Do they move through life differently after this moment? Do they show consistency when emotions settle down? Do they continue making the effort once the conversation is over? Do they demonstrate through behavior what they are expressing through language? That is where the real answer exists. And the reason you are capable of recognizing that answer is because you are no longer the same person you once were. The experience changed you. The separation changed you. The questions changed you. The uncertainty changed you. You spent time sitting with emotions that were not easy. You faced confusion. You faced disappointment. You faced absence. You faced the challenge of understanding what happened without always receiving the explanation you wanted. That process shaped you. It taught you things about yourself. It revealed strengths you may not have known you possessed. It showed you what truly matters. It clarified what you need from others. It clarified what you deserve. It clarified what you will no longer accept. Growth often happens in painful seasons, not because pain itself is valuable, but because difficult experiences force us to see ourselves more clearly. They force us to identify what aligns with us and what does not. They force us to become more intentional. That is why this moment is different. You are not standing in the same place emotionally where you once stood. You are approaching this from a place of greater understanding. You know what it felt like to share that connection. You know what it felt like to lose it. You know what it felt like to carry unanswered questions. You know what it took to heal. You know what it took to rebuild parts of yourself. And that wisdom remains with you. Their return does not erase that journey. It does not undo your growth. It does not remove everything you learned along the way. Instead, it becomes part of the next chapter. That is why this moment belongs to both of you. They are arriving with something to express. You are arriving with something to evaluate. Not from a place of judgment, not from a place of resentment, not from a place of emotional defense, but from a place of clarity. You are there to observe whether what they are offering aligns with who you have become. That is a very different kind of strength. It is not strength over another person. It is strength within yourself. The kind of strength that allows you to remain steady while emotions are present. The kind of strength that allows you to listen without immediately reacting. The kind of strength that allows you to stay connected to yourself while hearing something deeply meaningful. And during this interaction, there may be a moment that feels unusually still. A brief pause, a quiet space between words, a moment where everything seems to slow down. It may last only a few seconds, it may be subtle, but you will notice it. Before analysis begins, before conclusions form, before your mind starts searching for answers, there will simply be awareness. A clear recognition of what is actually happening. Not the story you imagined, not the fears you carried, not the hopes you created, just reality, exactly as it is. That is the moment worth trusting, because that awareness has been shaped by every experience that brought you here, and it will help you recognize whether what stands before you is truly aligned with your path. Whatever answer emerges, you are capable of handling it. That is something many people forget. They become so focused on the outcome that they overlook their own ability to navigate it. They focus on whether reconciliation will happen. They focus on whether the relationship can be restored. They focus on whether the future will look the way they once imagined. But the most important question is not what happens next. The most important question is how you choose to show up within the moment itself. And that answer belongs entirely to you. One of the most important things this moment gives you is clarity. For a long time, there may have been questions that stayed in the background of your mind, questions about what this connection really meant, questions about whether they felt the same depth that you felt, questions about whether they ever truly understood what existed between you, questions about whether your love, your effort, and your presence mattered as much as you hoped they did. Those questions are common after a meaningful connection ends. People often carry them for years, not because they are looking for validation, but because they want understanding. They want to know if what they experienced was real. They want to know if the significance they felt existed on both sides. That is why this moment matters, because it provides an answer that is not based on imagination. It is not based on assumptions. It is not based on wishful thinking. It is based on reality. Someone is standing in front of you. Someone is choosing honesty over avoidance. Someone is choosing vulnerability over comfort. Someone is choosing truth over silence. They are acknowledging things they once ignored. They are recognizing things they once failed to understand. They are taking a risk because something inside them feels important enough to risk it for. That does not happen without feeling. That does not happen without meaning. That does not happen without significance. And while none of that automatically means a relationship should continue, it does reveal something valuable. It reveals that your experience was not imagined. It reveals that your feelings were not misplaced. It reveals that your heart recognized something real. You did not misunderstand the connection. You did not create meaning where there was none. You did not make a mistake by caring deeply. That realization is important because many people spend years questioning themselves after disappointment. They begin to wonder if their openness was the problem. They begin to wonder if they cared too much. They begin to wonder if being vulnerable was a mistake, but that is rarely the truth. The truth is often much simpler. The problem was never your ability to love. The problem was never your willingness to show up fully. The problem was never your capacity to care deeply. Those qualities are strengths. The challenge was whether those qualities were being received by someone capable of meeting them. Because care alone is not enough. Love alone is not enough. Connection alone is not enough. For something meaningful to grow, it must be met with awareness. It must be met with readiness. It must be met with emotional responsibility. When those things are missing, even genuine feelings can struggle. And when something breaks down despite your sincerity, the mind naturally searches for explanations. It wants to understand what went wrong. It wants to protect you from future pain. And often, it arrives at a conclusion that sounds convincing. It suggests that perhaps you cared too much. Perhaps you invested too much. Perhaps you should have protected yourself more. Perhaps you should have given less. At first, those conclusions seem comforting. They create the illusion of control. They suggest that if you simply become less open next time, you will avoid being hurt. But that approach comes with a cost. Because when you begin shrinking parts of yourself in order to avoid pain, you also limit your ability to experience genuine connection. You start building walls around qualities that were never the problem. You begin treating your strengths as weaknesses. You begin viewing your ability to love as something dangerous instead of something valuable. And over time, that can disconnect you from one of the most beautiful parts of who you are. The ability to care deeply. The ability to be present. The ability to invest your heart fully when something feels meaningful. Those qualities do not need to disappear. They do not need to be reduced. They do not need to be hidden away. They simply need wisdom. They need direction. They need discernment. Because the goal is not to become less loving. The goal is to become more aware of where that love is being placed. The goal is not to close your heart. The goal is to recognize who is capable of honoring what your heart offers. That changes everything. When you understand this, you stop viewing depth as a weakness. You start seeing it for what it really is. A gift. A gift that becomes powerful when it exists in the right environment. Think about a seed. A healthy seed is not the problem when it fails to grow. The environment matters. The soil matters. The conditions matter. The support matters. The same principle applies to relationships. Your capacity to care was never the issue. The issue was whether the connection had the conditions necessary to support what was trying to grow. Understanding that creates freedom because it allows you to stop blaming yourself for things that were never yours to carry. It allows you to stop rewriting the past in a way that diminishes your own value. And it allows you to look back with greater compassion, not only for them, but for yourself as well. You begin recognizing that much of the pain came from misalignment, not from a lack of feeling, not from a lack of sincerity, but from two people existing in different places emotionally. One person may have been more aware, one person may have been more ready, one person may have understood the significance of the connection sooner. Meanwhile, the other person was still trying to understand themselves, still trying to understand what they felt, still trying to understand what was unfolding between them. That difference creates tension. It creates confusion. It creates moments where one person is ready to build while the other is still questioning whether building is even necessary. And when that happens, even meaningful relationships can struggle, not because they lack potential, but because timing, readiness, and emotional clarity are not yet aligned. That is what makes experiences like this so challenging. Something real can exist, something meaningful can be present, and yet it may still be unsupported in the ways it needs to survive. That does not make the connection meaningless. It simply means the circumstances surrounding it were incomplete. So when you look back now, do not focus only on what was lost. Look at what was revealed. Look at what the experience taught you. Look at what it showed you about yourself. It revealed your capacity for depth. It revealed your willingness to be authentic. It revealed your ability to connect in ways that go beyond the surface. It revealed what happens when you allow yourself to be emotionally present instead of emotionally guarded. And those discoveries matter, not because every future relationship will follow the same path, but because they provide a reference point. They show you what meaningful connection feels like. Not the fantasy version, not the idealized version, the real version. The version that exists in lived experience. The version that touches your life and changes it. That understanding becomes valuable moving forward. Because now the question is no longer whether you should suppress that part of yourself. The question becomes how you carry it into the future. Not with fear, not with hesitation, not with emotional armor, but with wisdom, with awareness, with discernment. Discernment changes everything. It allows you to remain open without becoming reckless. It allows you to remain caring without abandoning your boundaries. It allows you to remain hopeful without ignoring reality. It allows you to recognize sooner when effort is not balanced. It allows you to notice when communication lacks clarity. It allows you to step back when something feels consistently one-sided. Not because you are afraid, but because you are paying attention, and that awareness transforms your future experiences. Because now, as this conversation approaches, you are entering it differently. You are not walking into it believing your happiness depends on a particular outcome. You are not walking into it needing everything to work out perfectly. You are not walking into it hoping someone else will complete something inside you. You are walking into it as a whole person. A person who has learned. A person who has grown. A person who understands themselves more deeply than before. And that changes the entire dynamic. It moves you from waiting to observing, from chasing to understanding, from uncertainty to awareness. You are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are no longer trying to convince someone to choose you. You are no longer trying to hold together something that only